So we've reached what is for me the most interesting stage of any build, and that's the application of the decals. So to me this is where the model starts taking on its own individual appearance and hopefully matches the mental image I had of the completed build right way back when we started. So just a little bit about decal application before we start. So decals traditionally are water slide transfers. They seem to work best with warm water. This allows the adhesive that holds them onto the backing sheet to release quite easily without stressing the markings or stretching or breaking them even. And to that end I have a cheap Amazon coffee cup warmer, a ceramic dish with some water, tweezers, knives, a paintbrush that's never been used for anything other than decal application so we don't run the risk of getting any paint, pigment or anything on the decals, and a clean dish. Clean dishes for various decal setting solutions that are available in the market. So we've got things like Tamiya Mark Fit, Decal setting solutions. They do weak, medium and strong, green, yellow and red. And we've got the traditional micro sets and Sol. This is the Sol. Guns do one, I think it's called Mark Setter, which is there. So we've got all these in the arsenal. So I think with these we shall be probably using Tamiya Mark Fit to start with. We'll just see how they behave on some of the smaller stencil detail before we attack the main markings, just to make sure that there's no adverse reaction to the decals. Most of these setting solutions are stronger than each other. Some are quite mild, some are really aggressive, and the last thing you want to do is melt your markings. There are two decal options included in Kinetic's Pucara kit. The first one, Scheme A, is Pucara from the Falklands conflict in its early pale camo scheme, and that's the subject of this build. And we also have, looking a quick look at the instructions, a Uruguayan Air Force One in dark green and grey camo with a lovely sort of warthog nose art, which is quite befitting. I'm probably going to do that one with my second kit. So the decal sheet is extremely well printed. It's printed by Cartograph, so it's as good as anything you're going to get from the aftermarket guys. Items themselves are quite sparse, there's not too much to put on, which is going to be a speedy application process, which is unusual for modern type aircraft, as they're usually covered in all sorts of stencil and maintenance warning data, but this isn't the case. So we'll make a start and we're just going to trim off the decals that we don't need. So we're just going to cut the Uruguayan ones away from the sheet, like so, so that we've got those. We'll put those in the spare box, you never know when they'll come in handy, and we're going to make a start. So we're going to make a start now with the decal application. So I'm going to use Tamiya Mark Fit on the decals to start with. So using a brand new pipette, I'm just going to decant a little bit of the liquid into that dish. We've removed the marking from the sheet, and we're just going to place that in the warm water, and we're just going to let that soak for a few seconds. So the decal's been submerged in the warm water now for a bit, and it will slide freely on its backing paper. So we're just going to moisten the area that the decal's going to be applied to, and this is just water straight out the pot. We're just going to slide the decal in place with our finger, and then, if you remember from the painting stage, we had the scaled up instruction markings. So I know the centre of the dot of the marking to there is set distance. So we've got that in the right location. We're just going to use a cotton bud to roll the water out from underneath the decal. This needs moving down a touch, so, and then gently push the decal down and soak up all the remaining water. So the decals are already starting to conform to the surface detail, so that's a good sign. So we're not going to need a really strong setting solution. So we'll just put that bit of Tamiya Mark Fit on top, and we shall leave that for 30 seconds or so and watch the reaction. So while we're waiting for that roundel to settle down, and we'll put the serial number on the other wing. So again, just dipping it in the water. It's about 30 seconds, and it's floating freely on its backing. So we're just going to apply this now to the starboard wing in a similar manner as the roundel. So we'll just get it into a workable position. So again, we're going to moisten the area that the decal is going to go onto. And then we're going to slide it in place. Again, going from the upscaled markings guide, we know the position that it should be in, and we're just going to get that nice and straight. And follow the same process as last time. We just roll that water out. Just makes it a little bit easier to see what's going on. While we line everything up and get everything straight. One last check of the alignment, making sure everything is straight and it looks good. Rolling the water out from underneath the decal. Like so. So with the decals now complete, we can have a look at how they've gone on. They've worked fantastically as expected, and all the setting solution has dragged it down into the panel lines and the rivets, so that'll just need a wash reapplying now. We started looking, as we said at the beginning of the video, at getting the flaps on. They build up quite surprisingly strongly, certainly the inboard ones. Just got a bit of a mismatch with the camo pattern, so I'll have to touch that in. And we've got the fronts of the engine shafts added. So all in all, it's coming along quite well. We've still got a lot of work to do. We've got all the finer details to put in. So we've done the propellers. So they've been completed now, and they are a push fit onto each shaft as such. And as we saw, we've got the canopies done. So there's still a long way to go. So we've got all the smaller details. If we've been looking, we've got a load of aerials that are applicable to the Argentinian airframe or the Uruguayan one, and it is just worth checking the instructions, as I missed parts E12 and E13 that go into the holes in the side of the fuselage that are actually fuselage lamps on the Uruguayan example. Now, expecting those to be a really good fit, which they were, but they're not applicable to the Argentinian machine. So once they were added and glued in place, they did need a little bit of work just to blend those in and make them totally disappear. Not been 100% successful with that, but at this late stage of the build it was the best we could do. So if building an Argentinian machine, then I'd certainly fill those at the beginning of the build so that they do blend in seamlessly with the rest of the fuselage. So we've got things like cannon shell ejector chutes and access panels and aerials to go on. We'll do those right at the last minute. Still got the undercarriage to build up, and while we're handling that, they're bound to get broken off. So talking of the undercarriage, that's the next section of the build. It's quite detailed and complicated, so I'm just going to take my time and have a look through that before we start. I'm going to start by sort of gluing the wheels up and building up each section. Maybe that we could look at drilling out some of these lightning holes. Obviously we don't want to affect the integrity of the plastic and weaken it in any way, because there is quite a bit of weight in there. So that's all to come, so join me in a bit. So we're going to make up one of the main gear legs for the kit, and I've just removed all the parts from the sprue, and we're just cleaning up the sprue attachment points, and we're dealing with the wheel halves first. It's a nice little touch from Kinetic with these wheels. As you can see, the sprue attachment points are actually in little gaps that correspond to the key on the other side, but it also makes it so much easier to remove those attachment points because you're not affecting the raised rim round the part there. So as it's always said, it's the little things that matter, and it just makes the build that much easier if you're not fighting with poorly designed components. So we're just making sure that there's no trace of that attachment point anywhere. It just makes it that the wheels will join together flawlessly, and with very minimal clean up. And then we have perfect joints, so we're just going to use Tamiya extra thin. This is the quick drying version, just be careful it doesn't track under your fingers. Little squeeze, and that's one done. So we've just got to repeat this for the other side. I'll just give that a sand. So we must have a little bit of rough or raised surface there, just stopping that's going together. Good fit again. There is a bit of tread detail there, and just grooves all the way around the wheel. So we won't be too heavy handed with the seam clean up, try and preserve a bit of that. So they're the wheels, so we'll push them to the top of the cutting mat to dry, and we'll take a look at the other components. So the main gear leg is again superbly detailed. We're just removing, cleaning up the parts and looking for a mould seam, which there is, and that's right on the oleo as well, so we'll need to just knock that back. So by a mould seam, it's where the two parts of the mould have come together, and it just forms a very faint line down the centre of the part as the two halves meet in the mould. So the detail on that, quite nice. And this is now built up around a few more parts. So we've got the scissors, and they locate on there, the two raised dimples. Blob of extra thin on each. I'm just going to push that into place. Just put a bit more on there just to make sure. And again, we'll put that to one side to dry. We have a couple of retraction jacks. So again, just methodically going round, cleaning up the attachment points for the parts. It just makes the presentation of the finished model look so much better. So I did think at one point about drilling the lightning holes out on these parts, but they don't match either side, and I also think with the amount of nose weight that's gone in there, nearly 100 grams, it's probably worth not weakening the plastic in any way so that the undercarriage doesn't give out. Either way, it'll look good with a wash just to highlight those holes and details. Another retraction jack, and again just paying that little bit of attention just to remove anything that's not supposed to be there, and we can think about painting. So the first port of call with these undercarriages to paint anything metal for the hydraulic telescoping tubes such as the oleos. So we're just using Alclad. I'm just going to spray that in. So. And then there's a number of parts that are inserted in the actual main gear bays, so we'll just give these a coat of metallic, it's just Alclad aluminium. Making sure everything's got a good liberal coat to build up that metallic effect. And we'll set those aside to dry. So with the other parts set aside to dry now, we can just work on the seams of the tyres. I've already cleaned that one up just using Flory Models sponge sander so that it doesn't create any more flat spots on the side of the wheels, and we're just going to knock those back. Just have a quick check. Just make sure the flat spots are actually flat and that they've not got any seam line that'll inhibit them from sitting flush on the surface when the model's on its wheels. So we'll set about painting these now. So we just need something to hold them, so we're just going to cut the end off cocktail sticks to fit the axle hold. And they fit quite well. And we're going to use Guns tyre black. So with the airbrush loaded, we're just going to set about painting these tyres. Nothing fancy, just a good blast of tyre black. No primer or anything, just going down. Making sure we've got a nice coverage. Making sure that they're both well covered. And we've set aside to dry. Looking at online reference for Pucara undercarriage legs, they look to be very similar colour to our LMO2, if not a little bit lighter. So to this we're using Hateca CO23 Grey RLMO2 with a few drops of Insignia White in the colour cup. So the previous sections of metal have now been masked off, and these are going to be now just sprayed with that custom mix. So I'm just going to blast these in. And we're just going to let that dry. And the next stage of this will be to add a wash, or a gloss coat first and then a wash, before the parts are finally added to the model. That was a bit of good luck. Just as the colour cup run out, the parts are finished. So we'll just set those aside to dry. So we're now going to set about adding the main gear leg to the model. I've already done the others to practice the assembly, and it is quite straightforward. So to set the angle of the rake, the main gear leg has just been placed in its socket. And then we're going to get the retraction jack that's got the eye on the end, and we're just going to feed this into the model. Bit of super glue, and we're going to push that home, and then this goes onto an eye and a pin on the undercarriage leg. And that's going to set the correct angle of the undercarriage for you. So that should now not move. Then we've got the larger piece that goes down into a slot, and that just rests up against there, like so. So we'll glue this in place now. Tiny amount of super glue. This is the thin type, so it'll go into the join. And that should set the angle of that undercarriage leg quite nicely. The wheels do have flat spots, so make sure you get those to the bottom. And there is a key on the axle that will actually help you locate those. And we're just going to whack some liquid cement in that. And the wheels are going to now just need A little bit of tweaking just to make sure they sit straight and parallel on their axles, which they now do, and we should just leave that now for the glue to harden.